You're listening to Biz-Souls, the business podcast with an edge, hosted by me, Rona Lewis, and Jeffrey Hansler. Tune in for perspectives and discoveries about the changing world of business. It's time to connect to the heart, soul, and humor of how business gets done.
And we got a mark.
Hello, everyone in podcast land. Welcome to Biz-Souls. I am Rona Lewis.
I'm Jeffrey Hansler.
And you want to do the
Yes,
tagline?
and we get to the heart and soul of business and the people that make it happen.
And we have a person that makes it happen.
Absolutely.
This is my friend Jess Ponce the third. You're a third, Jess.
I am. Believe it or not, there are two ahead of me. So
wow. So Jess has an amazing background, and I'm going to read this, so it's going to be very smooth. He's recognized as a top media coach and personal branding expert. He uses laser focus training to help professionals from all industries and walks of life strengthen their leadership, presentation, and media skills so they can shine when they need it most in any speaking arena. As the author of Everyday Celebrity, a personal branding guide from a Hollywood media coach, and do I just say awesome, or is it A.W.E.S.O.M.E, because it's spelled out.
It's awesome, but it is an acronym.
Yes.
What does it stand for? What does it stand for? Let's interrupt the introduction.
Let's do that.
Okay, so it is aligned, wired, empathetic, simple, open, magical, and engaging. And these are 7 keys within all of us to become awesome speakers.
Fantastic.
I'm loving it.
Yes, so it's awesome. 7 keys to unlocking the speaker within. Jess created the art of authentic self-promotion, also known as the A factor. They're available in both English and Mandarin, which is an interesting combination. His expertise in media communication skills stems from his vast experience in the world of entertainment, where he produced and developed programming for ABC, Warner Brothers, E! Entertainment, Style, TV Guide Network, and MTV. And I have personal knowledge of that, which we'll go into in a moment. He is also the creative force behind Media 2x3. Is that
You got it.
Okay. A US-based media company that develops individual branding strategies for influencers, media personalities, and subject matter experts. He also consults and advises TV hosts. I obviously haven't had enough coffee. Fortune 500 executives, creative professionals, brand ambassadors, and 10X speakers. I'm jealous. Corporate clients include Lucasfilm, the Walt Disney Company, HGTV, LinkedIn, the Ritz-Carlton, and BNP Paribas. Did I pronounce that right? Okay. Jess co-created multiple communication and public speaking programs for adults and youth as a workshop facilitator and keynote for the A.W.E.S.O.M.E group in Taipei and its affiliates in Hong Kong and mainland China. Hence the Mandarin. There we go. That explains it.
Well, there are a lot of Chinese out there.
That's true.
So they can always buy a book.
In the United States, Jess is a professional speaker based near Hollywood, where he helps others find their strengths on leadership presence, brand awareness, crisis communication, and on-camera strategies. You've done a lot, Jess.
Wow, I love that. I'm gonna have you go around with me everywhere, Rona,
and
so
just
you can introduce me.
Because yes, there you go. Well, Jess and I have known each other since, was it 2007, 2008, something like that?
Yeah, it's been a very long time.
Yeah. Jess,
Rona was only 29 last year, so
That's
I don't know
right.
how in 2007.
we were, practically in the nursery together.
I was. Yeah, they really had to change all their
So you guys
angles.
played together at daycare.
Yes, we did. Jess was one of the producers on a show called View from the Bay on KGO, an ABC affiliate in San Francisco. And I was a recurring guest on there for food and fitness. And that's where we originally met. And you were, you produced me a couple of times, and then the rest was Michael, right?
Yes.
And
so one of the things that we loved about you, Rona, is your energy and your enthusiasm that you brought to everything. I think you were probably the original creator of the kitchen workout. I remember the broom and all of these wonderful things.
That's right.
And Rona, I actually think we may have met before that, because I was trying to replay it in my head. Did you not do KTLA at some point?
I did not.
Okay.
That was not me. That
Okay,
was someone who also had a lot of curly hair and 97 million teeth.
No, and
Well, I'm
KTLA.
jealous of curly hair because mine went away as I get
That's
older.
true. That,
less and
yeah.
less.
Yeah, KTLA's got a big uproar going on with
Yeah, there's a lot of
so it's
changes.
Mark and
Mark-
Lynette.
yeah.
Is it Lynette?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Lynette
a lot of
left
stuff
and all that
going
kind of
on
stuff.
there.
Well,
Anyway,
Lynette
Where
ended up in a-
management meets the public eye.
yes, a lot of, yes. Again, we digress. But yeah, so Spencer Spencer Christian was one of the hosts of it, and he used to do the weather for ABC in New York. He did the national,
Good
I
Morning
think. Yeah.
America. Yeah.
Yes, Good
So,
Morning America, right. And then a friend of mine, well, I actually dated him, Bobby, knew Spencer from a restaurant he worked in San Francisco, and said, this is Rona. She's pretty, pretty awesome. Showed him my cookbook or whatever, and he gave me, I think, Michael's name,
mhm.
and that's how I originally got on. And they just kept asking me back, and they're like, "What can you do next?" And I was like, "All right, I'll give you, some suggestions." And then the stupid recession came in, and they changed the whole format. So darn it.
So
And-
wait,
Thus,
maybe
life changed.
Yeah, a lot changed. Yeah.
So
Anyway.
maybe the connection in KTLA, maybe that's where they got their seventh inning stretch, something that they
From
do.
me,
Yeah,
that
they
was
got
it.
it
They
from
must
you.
have gotten it from me.
They're from the show, from
But,
you guys.
yeah.
You and
then
Jess.
And then when Jess moved down here, I took a class with you for not emceeing, for hosting. I took your hosting class, remember?
Yeah. So what I did is I took all of my TV production experience and translated it on the other side because I had been doing media coaching most of my career.
Mhm.
And then at some point decided, well, this is really where my passion and my heart is. And when I came back to Los Angeles, that's when I decided to do this completely full time. And that was in 2009.
Yeah.
And we had a TV, what was it, like TV food program.
Mhm.
And it was with a food stylist by the name of Denise Vivaldo, who's one of my favorite people in the industry. And we teamed up together and we did these workshops with chefs and other individuals who were trying to get their brand out there, to enhance their on-camera skills and be able to do cooking demos, because this was the advent of everyone doing anything and everything on Instagram.
Right.
Wow.
Right,
Yeah, we
very
just
cool.
had Nick Matone on, another one of Rona's friends.
Yeah, he's
And
in the
hospitality, and he consults the restaurants and a lot of the chefs
still a
and
big thing, yeah.
bartending. Yeah, it's huge.
It's- yeah.
It's still growing.
And then I actually had you come in to talk to my Toastmasters. Do you remember that? The Los Angeles Speakers Bureau, because nobody there knew anything about speaking on media. They were gobsmacked at how hard it was to, like, shut up and just tell what you need to tell, because you only have 6 minutes, and then speaking in smaller sentences and all, all this stuff. Nobody knew how to do that. And it's a real skill. It took me a while to get there. And
Really? She used to talk more?
wow.
Wow.
I think I had some really good segments.
Jess,
on
great job.
Rona, you've always been great. I mean, and that's one of the things is
Yeah,
that
I
you're
love
able
that.
to translate something that could be large in terms of like a 60-minute keynote into a 3-minute segment, but it's so challenging for some
It
speakers.
is.
And I remember that. And I was kind of walking in going, oh my God, how are these people going to be? Because they are speakers and they practice on this skill. But it really was a matter of being able to approach it from a media perspective, because everything is bite size.
Correct.
Right. So on that note, how has that changed in the advent of TikTok and Instagram and all that, for people who want to be speakers and are trying to get their brands out there? What's different than, now that there's all that versus like when you first started?
Well, I think there are two things. The first is how much attention we pay to videos.
Mhm.
So, let's say probably 15 years ago, 7 minutes would be what we could pay attention to in a video.
Yeah.
So YouTube videos used to be longer. And that's because as viewers, we were trained from commercial to commercial. Typical time was 7 minutes to watch a segment on TV. And then it became shorter and shorter, like 2 minutes. And then with the advent of, TikTok and Instagram, things are a lot shorter, 30 seconds, 15 seconds. But instead of doing something longer, you do more of it. So the frequency of you putting yourself out there in terms of using these platforms is far more significant than having something long. So you would have to break up a story or something that you're doing into bite-sized pieces and forget the extraneous stuff. I think the second thing that really impacts this is the idea of imperfection. Because when I first was in TV, everything had to be polished, everything had to be buttoned up, everything had to be well edited. And insert all of these people wanting or doing actually more things that were imperfect. And that became the typical, standard for the way that we approach videos. And people don't want perfection. They don't want things that are too polished. Even, have you guys heard of this thing called Be Real?
No.
So Be Real is a new social media platform where it's kind of like Instagram or Facebook or these other things where you randomly get a notice throughout the day and you're required to take a picture of yourself and whatever it is that you're looking at or whatever it is that you're doing. And the idea is to show that you're not perfect all the time, because everybody with their Instagram photos and all the things they're doing, they're planning and it's beautiful and they have these beautiful plates and all of these different things. But I think our appetite as media consumers has really changed because we want things that are more real, that are more tangible, that are a little sloppy, that are imperfect. And it's changing the way that we approach these. And it has been this for a while, because you have a whole segment of the population, digital natives, who that's what they want and that's what they're used to.
Yeah. I noticed that I was watching one of the, I watch a lot of the fashion, contests and, competitions and stuff. And there's one that's all about streetwear. And none of the judges are, some are better than others. It's obvious that they don't have media training. They're mumbling. They don't speak well. There is street slang, and I get that. And I'm not 22 years old, so I'm not up with all of it. And at the same time, I was like, I'm watching them going, I can't understand them. And I'm amazed. They may be incredibly talented in terms of design and things like that, and styles. Yet I'm surprised that whoever is producing that show had these people go on, because they can't speak.
Well, and video has completely transformed everything. Everything used to be on film, which is what Jess is referring to with the perfection, and they'd shoot it over and over until they got it exactly what, because then you had to have the chemical bath and then you had to go through everything. So as technology's improved, everything has gotten simpler. So, and it's brought the bar, the barrier, it's brought it down to the level where anybody can shoot it. I mean, the greatest quote I saw was the gal who said, if you've got a cell phone and Wi-Fi, you can make a fortune.
Well, yeah,
and it's absolutely true.
This is not one of those. This is like it's on either Prime Video or this is they spent money on this, and they have celebrities. So it's not about how they film it. It's about the talent themselves. It's so my question to you is, do you really see a difference in terms of who they're hiring, in terms of being more real versus being a little bit more media trained?
So Rona's, so I didn't explain it exactly.
Okay.
So that comment was about the talent, and that you can be on, and so you can be on the talent. What the question I wanted to ask Jess was about the organizations, and I was going to lead in with a quick story. So I was part of National Speakers Association for a while. Bless you. That was a good catch, man. That sneeze is going to explode somewhere off in the ether. Nice job. So,
He's done
and
this
I
before.
remember, so they had a earned designation called the Certified Speaking Professional, and to earn it, you had to jump through all these hoops. It was like 5 years of speaking. You had to have so many hours of speaking. One of the biggest arguments that came up was the length of time for the speech. And so Jess talking about the reduced thing, and it had to be a 40, I think they settled on a 45-minute speech. And that's what you had. And there was a lot of grumbling there. And right about that time, TED Talks came out where they're at 18 minutes. So before I get into the people, how are organizations, because Jess has got the background, how are organizations and, the guys that do have money, the stages, how are they translating? Because this new social media thing, Be Real, again, that's to the individual, and the individuals they may not have media training, although maybe they're going to have to include it in K-12. I don't know. So just from an organization standpoint, how are like KTLA, how is radio? How are they shifting things? How are the production companies shifting things?
Well, I think there's a whole rich conversation here. And I think there are multiple things that I'm hearing. So organizations, it depends on the type. So one thing that has changed for sure on programs that you would see on cable, like HGTV or Discovery or those ones, you're seeing experts and people who are personalities. Now, these personalities can be influencers, they can be authors, they can be people that are discovered. All of them more than likely bring an audience. So what networks are looking for is, who do you bring? And the who you bring used to be like a book, or maybe you had a big press following, but it wasn't something that was measured. Now we have something that is measured with social media. So how many Instagram followers do you bring? How many Twitter followers do you bring? And they go and they seek these individuals because of their brand, right? The people, the audience that are brought to the organization that are going to continue to follow and watch them. That is one thing. The second thing that I just hit on before was that they are experts. They are people who are key opinion leaders in a certain field, or at least notable. Now, what an expert is made of, it really is an audience, the fact that people follow them. It doesn't mean that they have certain degrees, certain certifications, that they have PhDs. Any of those things don't matter in regards to mainstream television. Now, those people might matter in something like a TEDx or other things, but even that's a variable, and people don't have to be as perfect. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that Saturday Night Live skit when they're talking about the TEDx or the TED speakers, where now I'm here, I'm going over here, and I'm going to stand. I'm motioning to the right and I'm walking over here, because there was a rhythm, right?
Right.
And what they're poking fun at is this idea of a formula.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at Lizzo, who I love and adore, she did a TEDx. So if you go out there right now and look her up, Lizzo is the person that showed up. And even with her ums and imperfections and her digressions, as you guys so much love, she still did really well. And she was who she was. So I think in terms of those types of organizations, we are much more flexible than we've ever been before in how people present themselves. And that includes length and time. You made a point a moment ago about the fact that anybody with a cell phone and Wi-Fi can be a content creator. This is true. Whether or not they're going to make millions of dollars really depends on how they come across. So while the technology has changed and our standard of how things are edited, what hasn't changed and actually has become more important is delivery.
That's my point. Yes.
So Jess, how's it changed your business for media training? Because a lot of it, because of that free flow, it's less about any kind of structure. I mean, there are structure within, okay, you should do this. You should cut out the ums, the ahs, the so's. By the way, we work on that all the time, and we've been failing on a regular basis. So there you go. It's very difficult, and we got to catch ourselves. And you don't have that structure anymore. So how does that affected your business and how you coach people? And does an organization hire you for coaching for their executives or for a team? Does an Instagram star hire you? We just had Leah and Mary on, and they came up with the he's a 10 butt, and so they're getting some traction. I don't think they've had media training.
Nope.
The answer to who hires me, yes, all of them. The way that it has changed, and let me give you a couple of examples, is when I deal with a TV show and the actors who are on the TV show, a lot of times they go and they say, well, what I want to say is this. And then I go, well, why aren't you saying this? And they're like, well, I didn't know if I could. I'm like, why are you in your head? Well, I know that the network wants this, and I've got this talking point, and I don't have this spoiler. And I'm like, well, when we're working together in this scenario where you're not being recorded, say whatever you want, get it out of you. So I think in that regard, I have allowed, or what we have seen in terms of media and presentation and when celebrities get out there, is that they have a little bit more freedom than they used to, because it's self-editing with them that makes the biggest mishaps or opinions, that go awry. That said, one of the things that we always get through in any of the training sessions is, where are the potential traps? How well are you prepared for when someone's going to come and ask you about, what do you think about the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida? What do you think about migrants being shipped from one state to another? And these are traps because they're political in nature, and also because they're social issues that people want to get your comment on, but they don't want to get the comment on it because it's about your show, right? They want to kind of like get you. So how do you navigate these waters, which I have a big philosophy, which is called tap and go. You address it to a certain extent, and then you take the conversation to where you want it to go. I think that celebrities realize more and more than ever that they can answer the questions they want to. And that's very different than saying no comment or I don't want to talk about it. It's taking it to some place that is interesting, because they need to pop off the page. Why are you talking to this celebrity? Why are you talking to this individual? And it's not just about talking points they can read on a piece of paper. It's how do you pop off the page? In terms of executives, it's a little similar in the sense that they want to know how to be able to present to different audiences. So it's not just investors where they're talking about numbers and figures. It could be the consumers. It could be their employees. So what I do, and this also applies to influencers, is I use a simple method called the A factor, which has 3 A's. First is define your audience for that particular moment. What is your agenda that you want to come across? And then what is your CTA, your call to action? Now, quickly about the audiences, ever since we were little kids, we've tailored our stories to different audiences. We might have one story. There are aspects of the story that were told differently to our parents than they were to our friends, than they were to teachers. Now, it might be the same story, but certain details we know were more relevant, and probably we didn't want to tell other details to people like our parents.
That's the spin. You have to spin it.
But still be authentic. I mean, that's the one thing that I think is really important now, Rona, than maybe even when we first met, is that everything needs to have some authenticity, but that doesn't mean it has to be completely open and you have to tell every detail. And I think that's where people get caught up, is that nobody knows the story more than you. So share what it is that you want to share, still be authentic in it, but it's not a free-for-all. Not everybody needs to know everything.
Well, yeah, and I've actually seen that a few times, that there are a lot of overshares on social media now, and it's like, I don't need to know that, So I just find that interesting, that it's like they forget that just because they're looking at a camera and not another person, that there aren't a bunch of people looking, or even on Facebook, when my friends share things, and yes, I'm definitely a different generation than the natives, that there's still things that's like, why are you sharing this? It's,
well, that also gets into the psychology. I mean, we know that the brain will manufacture stories, and people want to be part of the crowd. So people are making stuff up. Oh, this happened to me. It's like, oh yeah, me too. Oh yeah, it happened. No, it happened to me worse. It's just bad. One of the things you said though, like with Thane Rosenbaum, we had another Rona's friends. You may notice a pattern
I
here.
know a lot of
It's
people.
always Rona's friends. I don't have any friends.
Well, next
Anyway,
season will be all of Jeff's friends, right?
That's right.
yeah, well, that would be a short list. So Thane Rosenbaum was on, and he's a lawyer. He's a legal commentator,
a legal analyst
analyst for the different shows around here, and he refuses to work with a couple of the shows because they give him a script and say, "This is what you're going to talk about," and he goes, "Nope, not happening."
Yeah, and it's really interesting because these are, I mean, all the programs he's on are nationally, national shows and cable stations and things like that. And he's like, he said, I speak the word of law, and I'm not going to. And he said, I have my opinions. That's not why I'm being hired. And he lays it out. And we actually had him on for the Roe versus Wade controversy, and right before the
decision came out,
so
and we wanted. And what was funny is all these people that my few friends that are outspoken are like, oh yeah, I want to be on it. And it was like, okay, well, we're shooting it. Well, I don't know. I don't want to upset anybody.
And it actually worked out better because if there was opinions on the show, Thane could not have gone on. He wasn't allowed to do that. So it worked out perfectly. Anyway, again, we digress, Jess, because this is about you. So what I want to know is, what's your favorite thing out of all the things you do? Do you have a favorite thing that you like to work with, or type of talent?
Or literally, or the other way to ask the question is, what are they calling you for where they're going to give you lots of money?
Oh yeah. That's an even
Wow.
better.
That's generally my favorite thing.
That's right.
My favorite thing is actually a workshop, to be honest, where I'm doing any of these things, whether it's personal branding, public speaking, media training, because there's such a thrill, as you guys probably experienced, of being live in a room with people and seeing almost those transformations for however long they're going to be, right? Because, sustainability is one issue that requires work and effort and practice. But to be able to see people go from either being negative, like, I don't need this, to having an aha moment, or seeing somebody nail, like, I did a workshop and this guy was like, oh, I've done branding, I know all of this. And then I said, okay, great. Well, why don't you come up and be the example for us? And to see how he was like, I never thought of it this way, was such a charge and so great, because a lot of people, we don't all have to get up there and be volunteers in order to get something out of this. The experience of being there with other people and relating to it, that's probably my favorite. I also do like coaching people individually where they have the aha moment. And what I love about it is I do the work, they go away. I do another person, they're gone. So it's that like extra boost that I'm able to give somebody. And then I may be able to see them again, but from a business perspective, I really love doing that type of work because I get to get a new challenge. And I want to digress for just a second, because you guys.
Oh, no, you can't.
I can't. I thought it was
Only
like
we can. Only we can.
Please, though.
Go ahead.
Please,
Can I get a special pass? Okay.
Please go ahead.
A moment ago, you guys were talking about something that I think is really relevant today, and that is opinions.
Oh.
And I think one of the things that we see, especially with digital natives, so millennials and Gen Z, is that on one level, having an opinion on social media is so easy. Two, they do it all the time. But third is, how do you deal with haters? And that's one of the things that I think in our generation, we're like, oh my God, I don't want to deal with that. I'm upsetting people. I'm going to divide things up. And then also you have to remain accountable to it. On the flip side, you have not a whole generation. I don't want to generalize, maybe 99% of them. But anyhow, no, you have a way in which people learn social behavior that's not live and in real person. And that can also be a challenge. And you can't necessarily hide behind a device. Now, we call it hiding. They would say it's a mode of communication. So that's also perspective. But the whole idea of having opinions and being able to stand behind them and also having haters, I am so grateful that I grew up in the time that I did, because that bullying, that challenge today is extremely difficult.
I think it makes people braver when they're not face to face, because I have found the younger generation is not very good in terms of confrontation when they're in person.
Well, and that's a learned skill.
Yeah.
The ability to have healthy dialogue or healthy conflict. That's just a learned skill, and people are terrified where it's going to go because they see a bunch of nut cases out there, and even the nut cases. I think it's learned behavior. They think that this is the way you state an opinion. So
That could be.
there's a lot of learning going on.
Yeah, there is.
And by the way, just I don't even like the idea of digital native. Because I started off, my first job at Apple Land was Apple Computer. So 1980, I'm working with computers, and then I think you could have counted the websites up. Well, my website originally went up in 95, and I was building my own databases. So when people say, "Oh yeah, I'm a digital native," okay, well, what does that mean? So the generalizations are good as a guidepost. And we just and we have to be understand that. And I understand why people say, "Oh, digital natives," because it's a way of describing people that grew up with a cell phone in their hand, or a smartphone in their hand.
Go ahead, Jess, were you going to say something?
No, and I hear your point, and I think it depends on. It's like anything else. How are you defining it yourself?
Yeah.
The way that I'm using it is people who don't know what it's like not to have internet, that don't know what it's like to not have Wi-Fi.
To have a rotary phone.
yeah, rotary phones, because I remember going to the library to look up things, and no one is worse than the other, right? It's not like, oh, you don't know how to do that. It's just what was available to you as you were growing up, and what was your go-to sort of rhythm. I think that there are young people who use devices that have great instincts when it comes to communication, because they know how words are going to land. They could see and predict, if they were going to comment on this, how it's going to be received. So I think one of the things that we can all learn from each other based on our use of devices, maybe an older generation who didn't always use devices, who claimed to be much more socially engaged live and in person, and those who have relied and grown up with devices as a mode of communication, can learn from each other. One is, I think those who are more likely to be live and in person can learn to have better instincts. How are my words going to land? What am I going to say? Can I get a sense of where they're coming from? Likewise, people who have had lives without digital devices can teach other people, okay, well, this is how you would engage live and in person. So I think the dialogue can be cross-generational. And I think that's a really good point that you make. And I didn't mean to discriminate or to stereotype a particular type of individual, because I do think we can all learn from each other, and we all have very distinct communication assets that could serve one another.
Jess, actually, no, I didn't take it as any offense at all on anything. I was actually commenting on it because this is always, I probably should ask you for help in this. I identify people like Bill Maher, Dave Chappelle. These are guys that are just constantly pushing the envelope of what you talk about. And I've always been doing that in my programs. And I've got clients that hire me back for the fifth time, and I'm getting a little bored working with the audience again, even though it's a different audience. So and you pick up some of the scuttlebutt that's going on in the organization. So I'm always like, I wonder if I could land this one, see how it goes. And just like Bill Maher and Chappelle, they get in hot water. I think, though, that there's a trend for that. And that's what I wanted to ask you about for social media. Like Bill Maher, he had his whole show canceled because he did a joke once. I don't remember what the joke was. They canceled the show, the network canceled, just like people canceled Chappelle. Anyway, Bill Maher. So we just had Ian the hurricane go through. He just did his Bill Maher show. And one of the jokes, he's doing his monologue jokes, and one of the jokes is, yeah, it's terrible what happened with Ian. There's still, hundreds of thousands of people down in Florida without their cocaine. And I'm going, wow, that's a little close. It's a little close. I mean, people are still reeling. They haven't even picked themselves up, and they haven't found all the bodies yet.
Little
And
too
yet-
soon. Little too
And
soon.
yet,
Definitely.
I admire him for that. So how do you deal with someone that is because I've always pushed the envelope with an audience, and I paid the price for it too with certain
So,
organizations.
and is that part of their branding, their personal brand, or what do you think?
Well, okay, so let me define personal branding the way that I use it, because I think that that's important. It is how you connect with your audience, remain accountable to them, and sustain their trust. So it has to do with connection, trust, and sustainability. And I think on some level, Rona, what you describe right now is that their audience can expect this from them, right?
Yeah.
And that's who they are. And Jeff, even like you're like, oh my God, I was laughing at this. I didn't want to laugh at this, but
I did.
Okay, well, maybe you didn't want to laugh in public, but it hit
Too
your warped
late.
sense
Too
of
late. It's
humor,
happening now.
right? It hit your sense of humor. So this is a guy whose brand you can identify with,
Right.
and he's been consistent in it. So on many levels, it's on brand. The question becomes, that brand's not for everybody.
Right.
And I think where we're in a really interesting time right now is cancel culture. Because people are so anti cancel culture, but there is some benefit to it in terms of the masses speaking like, we don't want this anymore, or this isn't acceptable. And it's how you handle it more than anything. Now, I would imagine, excuse me, I'm having now a tongue twist moment myself. I would imagine that Bill Maher isn't going to apologize. That's not who he is. So there are going to be people who are, and he's completely fine with that. And he will end up back someplace in some time when either people will remember it and be okay with it, or people will have forgotten,
That's a good point.
I'm sorry, because this is good. I love the direction you're taking this. So this is a bit dramatic. This is like Nazi Germany, where if you were the normal people when it first started, and they started off, the SS and the brown shirts, they started off, they didn't attack the whole world. They just started attacking different groups. And what happened is everybody else just kind of shut up, and they just stayed on the side. And what we all wish we would do is speak up. And I'm pretty much had it with cancel culture. I understand their opinions. I understand there's a lot we can learn from it. I understand that people put meaning on things. And there is history, though. And I just decide I'm not going to play it that safe. So I'm going to be the person that's going to say, you're welcome to your own pronoun. You're welcome to change your name. You're welcome to do something. Just don't drag me into your system and force me to work your system. I'll treat you with respect. I'm just not going to compromise my values. So how do you coach that? How do you help? Because there is a financial price to pay for that. And there is, it's so easy that if enough people get against you, doesn't matter how right you were, the network will shut you off. Or, how do you deal with that as a media consultant side? Do you just go, that's right, Jeffrey, go ahead. Don't worry about it. Sail your ship.
I think it's a rich conversation first. And, personal choices are individual choices. And so I respect that. What I would like to do is to take your example and make it less political, because I don't know if it's always one group going after another. And I think when we talk about cancel culture, There are two sides to it politically. There are conservatives who are trying to cancel, and there are liberals who are trying to cancel. But let's instead look at communist China. Okay. So when the nationalists were there, it wasn't the communist regime
Uh-oh.
Hang on, Jess.
turned people in.
Jess.
Yeah, you're
Hang
a
on.
little
We-
unstable.
Yeah, we just froze. We just froze. Hang on one second. Just give it a chance to catch
Okay.
up.
Okay. What? Okay. Nope. I think you're okay now.
Okay, I can hear you guys and I can see you guys.
Okay,
so
now
maybe-
I
Right,
get-
right.
yeah,
Okay. So what I'd
Um,
like you to do, Jess, what I'd
Start
like
that
you to
again.
start it again when with national China.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. So insert in, let's take a look at communism in China. So when communism first started taking place, what happened is that nationalists, everybody was out there doing their thing. It wasn't the soldiers who came in and made everybody communistic. It was your neighbor. So if you did something that the party didn't agree with, it was your neighbor who turned you in.
Right.
And so it was mass mentality that created change. Now, in this instance, it was those who were doing the I'm going to turn you in believed in something. They believed in work, they believed in food because there wasn't enough to go around, whatever their belief system is, right? And those who were nationalists believed, well, that doesn't matter. I want to preserve the way things are. Okay. So I'm just taking the value out of it. I think with cancel culture, there is a similar philosophy. Now, I want to be very clear here politically. I am not saying it's like communism. Okay.
Yeah.
Ding, 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 ding. Because I don't want to be canceled myself. That is not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that you have a group of people saying, we no longer want to hear that. We no longer want to do that. So they're creating change by people socially. Right. And that's the whole idea of, remember, social media, the first word social has become a sort of a crazy battlefield because people feel more entitled and more enabled to share opinions behind a screen than they do in person. Now we're finding that people are doing that in person too. Okay. So I think it's a conversation that we need to have because it is not going anywhere.
Right.
So to be able to say that I want to avoid cancel culture, I think is something that's kind of naive. Also, because remember when we said, oh, I'm not going to go on social media. Well, we live in a world today where if you're not on social media of some extent, you're hiding something. And therefore, I don't want to know about you. I don't trust you because I need you to be visible. I need you to be able to be seen. Now, with cancel culture, you have individuals who are trying to say that isn't acceptable or I don't like that. In retaliation, a lot of people are saying, well, I'm not going to change it. You have to deal with that. Okay, well then we're not going to buy you any. We're not going to advocate for this show. We're not going to spend our money here. That's capitalism at its best, choosing where you're going to spend your money. Okay, so there I was getting a little political. Now I'm going to go back to
It's okay.
being the communication expert. And what ends up happening is the way that we're communicating, because the audience that's canceling, they're consumers. That's an audience that you are no longer going to reach. So if you are being canceled, you have to decide, is that okay? Or do I want to change? Or is there something of value here?
Yeah.
And so the individual who might be canceled, the one who may have misstepped, you have a decision to make. And a lot of times people just dig in their heels. And are you willing to even open to have a conversation? Now, I will say this, Jeff, I'm going to push back slightly on the pronouns thing, is that the way I identify myself is the way I identify myself. You can like it or not, then don't identify, period, right? It's one of those things that language is one of the things that we know in communication has gone throughout history that evolves. It's a dynamic process.
Right.
I have a challenge on plural versus singular, but I've come to learn that if that's the way somebody wants to be identified, the dignity of how they want to be identified is fine. If I'm going to engage that person, I will use whatever pronouns they, he, she wants.
Mhm.
Now, there are people who might feel like it's being forced. But I remember as a gay man who grew up in a world, before gay marriage, and it may go away again, that, well, you're forcing your sexuality. I'm not forcing anything on you.
Correct.
I'm just going to love who I love. And you can like it or not. Well, we don't want to see it. Well, I don't want to see you making out with your wife or your boyfriend on the side of the street, but yet you have the freedom. Well, it's not, and it's this debate. But there comes conversations at a certain point where anything that is uncomfortable, I think, on a certain level, anything that we have a challenge expressing is such a rich opportunity for discussion.
Well, it's like the women who breastfeed in a restaurant instead of going in, it's like it's a perfectly natural thing, or I'm eating, the kid's eating, it is just in a different way. And a lot of people feel uncomfortable with it, or it's not the proper thing to do. And,
Well,
I think that's definitely a related thing.
well, and that's the thing I'm talking about. People should feel comfortable in what they are. Where I have the problem with the they, them, and the pronoun is when you hear of a professor that's been teaching in college for 30 years, and he happens not to call somebody a they or a them, and the student body gets all upset, and they fire somebody who's been dedicated his life to something like that. So that's where I have the problem, where it's like it becomes a threat thing. I'm absolutely about people wanting to identify as themselves. Just give everybody a little grace on things,
Well,
So
especially,
we're on the same page,
yeah,
Jess.
it's
I
just,
believe.
like I was on a Zoom call with somebody, and they were,
Jess is holding that pose. Are you holding the pose, or are you frozen? I think we lost you, Jess. Yeah, yeah, you're
okay.
completely frozen. Are you still type something in the chat if you're still there. Ladies and gentlemen, we're having technical difficulties.
Yeah, and then while you were off, we were, just got. It's like we totally went off, and he's like, you didn't even ask how we got into the business. So I think we should digress and ask you that question. So Jess, how'd you get into the business?
Well, Rona, I'm glad you asked. So I was studying in college, and a cousin of mine had gotten a sort of like a production coordinator position. And she said to me, hey, do you want an internship? And so I did an internship and happened to be out in the field, 2 weeks later, and fell in love. I thought going into school, I always wanted to create a magazine that would, I'd be the editor and owner, where I would work on the layout and the stories. And this happened to, be on, just different passions I had growing up. And then I got into television and realized this was something I loved. And it evolved from there, because one of the things that I am drawn towards all the time is not only the visual, but the storytelling. And that's, at the end of the day, what all of this is about, is how do you tell stories? How do you connect with people? And the people that are responsible for telling those stories, the hosts and the experts and the individuals who are contributing to different stories in terms of this medium. And now the medium has changed, where video is no longer on broadcast television. It's everywhere.
Right.
Yeah. And I think where we got cut off, I was one of the things, your picture froze. So, and after a while, I thought he's either holding a position really good, or that camera just froze.
I don't know. Did I look good in the frozen one?
You
Because
did. You actually looked good. You were
like this,
you were
there's other times
pensive
like-
and attentive all at the same time. Wow. Yes. Oh, that's interesting.
Just stay just like that, because we think we're really interesting now.
Anyway, what I was saying is, did you hear the part about the professor getting axed? And
yes.
And then what I said is, that's the problem I have, where the pronouns become a threat or a weapon. They've weaponized it to get rid of somebody that's dedicated their life to teaching and doing different things. And that's what I don't like. And then I finished by saying, just, I think you and I are closer than that. In belief systems, people have an absolute right to express themselves. They just need to give people grace in doing it. And I think that's what we've lost, the ability to give people grace on things.
And I agree with both of those things, that people can be given grace.
Mhm.
And people also need to make an effort. I don't know the circumstance, but it would be hard for me to imagine a professor being fired over one comment. And at the same time, sometimes that's how change is made,
Yeah.
by something dramatic, and I'm going to go to, I am both a person of color and also a gay man. And not until people get mad, and until people, like, you have to scream. It's like an argument, right? Sometimes it's screaming at the top of your lungs so you realize how important this is, and because people aren't hearing. At the end of the day, there is gay marriage, or there are gay rights, not because of the gays, but because of the allies.
Mm.
And I think there's a play between both, of being gracious and also making an effort. So I think on both sides of anything, that's where change happens, and understanding and empathy can lead the way. And sometimes, as relating this back to communication, is that sometimes when things are so loud, you have to hear it, good or bad, and the choice becomes, what are you going to do with it?
So and this is from a media standpoint, or did you have a question? I'm sorry.
No, I was, we'll go back to the branding industry and the influences in a minute. Let's just finish this conversation here. Go ahead, ask your question.
I don't know if we can finish it. We're just digging in. So from a media standpoint, so you brought up a great point. So now we've got awareness, and we've got the U.S. coming back to a more realistic, or a real point where there's less judgment going on by most of the normal people, less judgment going on, and people are accepting that people have different tastes and different desires and different things going on. Hollywood is still putting through a lot of violence, which is one of the things that Bill Maher was talking about. Going, really, we're talking about gun violence, and yet you've got all this. How many people can you shoot in 2 minutes? And yet, and then, okay, so we've got Hollywood doing that, and then Hollywood is also cracking down on, you can't. So there's they've got people reading scripts, they've got people for sensitivity, they got in terms of love scenes, sex scenes. You can't shame anybody for anything anymore, and it's brought a lot of the comedy out of, people are losing their sense of humor.
Big time.
So how do you balance, how as a media coach, God, I don't know. And you're great, because these questions are broad and you really kind of focus them in. So there's a talent you've been demonstrating this whole time. People are going to go, what was he asking? That was a great answer. Well, what was he asking anyway?
So much for the guest speaking more than the than the host.
How do you coach them and prep them for media where they can both be progressive, have some fun at something without offending somebody? I mean, what are some
It just
guidelines?
seems like, yeah, it is awfully easy to offend somebody somehow,
And this is true. At the same time, it is also really easy to connect with someone. And I think it's a matter of where your focus is.
Mm-hmm.
For example, when I work with celebrities who don't want to comment on something, like a spoiler, okay, and they obsess about the spoiler, they're really uncomfortable in the interview and don't really give you anything. But instead of focusing on the spoiler, focus on all the things you can talk about. So I think, first of all, it's the perspective you go into an interview with. So what's my intent here? What are all the wonderful things I can talk about? And when it goes right or left, how do I bring it back on target? So when you go into an interview, have intent, have an agenda, because the person interviewing you has an agenda for sure. The second thing is, how you answer the question. Answer the question you want. And that's not meaning that you avoid anything. But for example, when you talk right now about violence in the media, I mean, the media does have its place, but one has to ask, is it Hollywood, or is it Silicon Valley who's creating all of these violent games that, are rampant? Or do we need to look at all of our responsibility? So when you open it up, and I'm not cute, I mean, because here's the thing, we can go down in this particular answer, we can go down the road of blaming Hollywood for this, but Hollywood is a fictional place, right? It's like I have friends from out of town who want to go to Hollywood. I'm like, you don't want to go into Hollywood,
Yeah, so you
right?
definitely don't. Yeah.
Physically into the area of Hollywood. But
West
there,
Hollywood, maybe. Hollywood,
Well,
no.
yeah, and I think, yeah, most people think Beverly Hills is Hollywood. I mean,
exactly.
no.
And if you ask somebody in Beverly Hills, you live in Hollywood, they would be like, hell no, right? And so I think what happens here is one is not blame. Blame game is really, a game that leads nowhere. More so, how do you engage in an active dialogue? Where is our responsibility? Because Hollywood responds to consumers. And as
Right.
consumers, what are we doing? What are we advocating? What are we watching for?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
So,
action
media,
films.
yeah. So, from a media standpoint, what I try to do is demystify that for my clients and to say, what is the answer you want to do, and where do you take? Do you want to go down the accusatory road? Because if you do, you're going to lose. There is no win.
And what did I
No,
want to
finish?
I got well, it's an add-on question because I'm a senior citizen and I would forget my question
That's
if we
right,
went on
that's
too
right.
far. So I'm gonna come in here and take advantage of the fact that the government thinks I'm old. Anyway, so
You get
what
discounts though, right?
oh,
Does?
we did. We just got one in the other night.
Okay.
So oh, excuse me. So okay, cut. Um John Cleese was he was being interviewed and he was talking a little bit about wokeism. And one of the problems that he said was, he said, look, my daughter invited me. We were on stage. We had a very mixed group, gay, color, different ethnicities up there. And he goes, and it was an improv session where we were taking shots at each other, playfully like you would with a group of friends, just what do you call it? When you're just
Ribbing, teasing?
ribbing,
Yeah,
teasing,
yeah.
that stuff. And a reporter just reported the comments. John Cleese said this, called somebody this, or said this to somebody, and took it completely out of context. So I know you're coaching them. Media can be cut and clipped, and the context can be without context. Something can come across terribly.
There are a couple things there. One is you're never off the record if you're around a reporter.
Right.
Two, on some level, you're never off the record, period, because there are phones, there are things that are around all over the place when you're in public. More so, there would be people who ask, why did he need to make that comment? Why was that an acceptable means of a joke?
Mhm.
And somebody might seem like, well, I can laugh about whatever. And I'm like, but why are you laughing at the expense of another individual? Is that not something we do as kids? Like, oh, look at that person, the person who might be restricted in movement. Oh, he or she is walking with these crutches, like, oh, look like that. That's something we do as kids. But as adults, we would say, no, that's not acceptable. Don't make fun of that kid, because he, she, they, have a quote unquote disability, or they have a challenge that's presented to them. They wouldn't make fun of you because you have diabetics or diabetes. Well, they might make fun of you because you're not eating candy. It's behavior that you look at, or that other people are looking at and saying, is that necessary? Is that joke relevant and important? So I think as a media coach, one is I tell people all the time that you're always on the record, to be very attentive to how you respond to something. And second, is that comment necessary? And how will it be replayed? Because, somebody who could be speaking this entire time, and it's the one sentence that will always be taken out of context. And Jeff, you were absolutely right. And that to me is a soundbite. So the way I define a soundbite is a statement, if even taken out of context, still accurately represents you and your brand.
That's great advice. Great advice.
Very good advice.
Do you want to change tacks a little bit and talk about Jess's other talent of
Absolutely. You take it. I've been hogging the airtime and
Yes, he has. And
yes.
and it's
Rona, you go now, girl.
all right.
Go.
So we weren't going to talk about this, and I think we should now that we have two people who are who use it in business. So, Jess, how did you get into the body language portion of what you do?
So body language is one of the forms that we communicate. So to be clear, I approach it from a communication media expert. So I do not claim to be an investigator or a psychologist. I am an observer of communication. And, the UCLA study that, said it was like, 90%, is nonverbal. That's been debatable. But what we do know is that our expression as individuals is more than just the words that we use.
Right.
When we are talking about how we present ourselves, there's context, there's medium, there's mood, and there's also the mechanical aspects of our facial expressions, our hand gestures, and how we operate in that space. So for me, when I work with media talent and I work with professional speakers, I work with people on panels, something as simple as if you're on a panel and you're not talking, people are still looking at you. They're still assessing you. They're still evaluating you on how you respond to something. And how do they do that? It's with your nonverbal communication. Because one of the basic things that happens in communication that creates conflict is a double bind, right? Where your words are one thing, but your body indicates another. And people are like, no, you're lying to me, you're lying to me. And then the conversation just goes completely awry, right? And how do you do that? Because instinctively, something isn't right. And so when I speak about body language, I do it in that sort of context.
Right, because I know you were just interviewed about Prince Harry and somebody else. Who was the
The
other
new
one?
king.
The new, yes, and you had some very astute things to say about them, which I enjoyed that very much. I don't remember exactly what they are, but
But they were astute. Oh my God,
they were very astute. As I'm reading this,
No,
I'm
one
hiring
of
you,
your
Rona, as my publicist.
the one.
wait,
I'm going to
one-
hire you as my
There
publicist.
you go.
yeah, I looked over it. One of the comments was that Harry's different, changes when he gets in his uniform.
In his uniform. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I think that on some level is visual, right? Because we see him differently. And that is not necessarily that spoken in words, but also I feel like when he does speak, his cadence is different. His eye contact is a little different, and also the way in which his body gestures move. Because one of the things that we like about Harry that we observe constantly is the fact that he seems more down to earth.
Yeah.
So there's a contrast between the Harry we see that is more casual and in conversation with his wife and with his friends, to this guy who then steps into this regal, literal uniform and embodies it.
Yeah. Jeffrey and I have had conversations about celebrities who have gone on to back a cause and gives talks on it, and then you've said we won't mention names because we don't want to get sued, but there were people who were giving talks about experiences that through body language they were either exaggerating or didn't happen.
Well, no, I can have opinion. One of them was just Madonna when she got an award. Yeah, she got an award and she was going into how she was abused and all the things going on. And the body language just wasn't in sync with what she was talking about. It just was off. And I was thinking, I'd be asking a lot of questions of her. I think this is fabrication. Not all of it, just there were parts that was embellished maybe, or things like that. Madonna, I love you. I love what she does. I love her as an artist and everything else.
She's a great marketer.
Never met her.
Yeah.
Never asked her on a date.
And it's a little different in body language in sales or anything else. I think there's an overarching similarities, in terms of matching what you say excuse me, as opposed, with what the micro expressions are and how your shoulders are, things like that.
Right.
It's pretty similar. And it's, how do you find it, just like we are on Zoom or another one of these, remote platforms where it's strictly from the shoulders up? What do you see is the big difference?
Communication is communication, right? There is a sender, there is a receiver, there's a message, and there's feedback. So this is the basic loop of communication. There are many things that come into play. How the sender, sends the message, how the receiver receives it, whether their feedback is empathetic or they're actively listening. When it comes to Zoom, things it is completely changed one thing for me more than anything else. And that is the blur between home life and work life.
Sure.
I think during the pandemic, we brought work into our homes, which I think also enhanced the lack of perfection. People were more casual in their attire. They were in their living room. You got a sense of their space, so they would be in their bedroom. You
They
would
didn't
hear,
necessarily wear pants.
exactly, I'm wearing shorts right now. I
There you
mean,
go.
it's warm here in LA. And also you would hear kittens in the background, you would see dogs run by, you would see kids.
Yeah.
So we were a lot more forgiving. On many levels, we were a lot more human.
Yes.
Now, at the same time, it also created a lot of multitasking because, people would be reading emails instead of just, paying attention. And so what I try to get people to do is, one is to be in the moment. So when I'm training somebody or I'm observing somebody on Zoom, is turn off your emails, right? Turn off your notifications. Try to make your Zoom full screen. Second, always be on camera. Because I know that there were some policies, well, unless you're speaking, you don't need to be on camera. You need to be on camera because you need to know that this is important.
Yeah.
This is a more or less a formal situation, because context is everything when it comes to communication. And I want to hit on Jeff's comment in a moment, because I think context relates to Madonna. So context is important, but also how are you making eye contact? One of the distracting things about when people were working on Zoom is they're looking at themselves. Right.
Right.
I'm looking at myself right now and I'm like, okay, how's my positioning? What am
Yeah.
I doing? And, do I look,
How much
oh,
Sit up
cheekbones?
straight.
it's straight, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna button this. I got a little tightness here. So we're visually seeing ourselves, which on some level is
I don't
good
know
because
what you mean.
yeah, because we don't do that when we're live and in person. In real time, we don't necessarily do that. And so because the context is different, doesn't mean that the basic communication cycle changes.
Mhm.
But how do you use the medium to your advantage? If you're doing video, be on video.
Right.
And if you're required to pay attention by eliminating distractions. That might also include where you're doing your interview. So if you're in a dining room, for example, are you keeping your eye line with your kids? Because you're going to be completely distracted. I love the fact that when we were working during the pandemic on Zoom, that it brought our home and our work life together because it made us more real. And I hope that a part of that continues, because I know a lot of people are going back into offices. And what I hear from people is that, like, they're trying to kill time. Like, I'm required to be here 8 hours because they learned a different way of working. I
That's
mean,
right.
there were people that would take 2-hour lunches because they had to take care of something, but went back or went and did work when the kids were, asleep. So context is everything. And I think with Madonna, and you point to this wonderfully, Jeff, and I'd be curious to hear your perspective, because you're reading her, right? And you would ask all of these different questions. I think from a media standpoint is that she might be more of that old school, but she's also that person who is so in control of her image that in that instance, if she's an accepting award, she's going to say what she's going to say. And it's almost like gospel, right? I am Madonna. I am saying these things. Therefore, you are going to believe them. So for her, it was much more presentation. Now, I love Madonna, but also I realized the celebrity machine that she has behind her. So in that instance, it was a presentation. And what you noticed was that her words are not matching her body. And maybe had it been more of an engaged conversation, that might have been different. She might have loosened up. I don't know. But both of these are examples of context.
Yeah,
Good point.
yeah, no, it's excellent points. And one of the things, I don't know if it happened. I'm asking the question. So for me, it was transformational. It took me forever to learn how to. I mean, I studied and studied for years, and nothing was clicking. And then all of a sudden, it started to click, and then it was like this, exponential curve of learning. And all of a sudden, it was life transforming. I mean, I'm talking to somebody and I'm reading that and I'm going, oh my God, this person is just lying to me. It was hard on relationships, all kinds of relationships. I was coaching somebody and for sales and I was saying something and she goes, oh, thank you very much. And it was like, okay, how do you really feel? So,
I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah. Oh no, this really happened to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, and that's imagine working with this. Someone like you, Jess. I mean, he's very good at body language, and I can't get away with crap.
Well,
So.
no, and the question was, Jess, I mean, was it transformational for you as you started, work on that skill?
It was,
or no, you had high intuition before.
I do think I had some intuition, which is probably what drew me towards television and then doing the media coaching. I am a certified coach because I've gone through coaching program, and that was transformational in and of itself because, and this is a practice that I do when I media coach people, especially if it's a cast, I have them interview each other because why I find that's important, or if I work within a department, is that you get to be the interviewee, you feel the pressure, but you can also feel the pressure as an interviewer. And I think both of those perspectives help you. When I went through my coaching program, I was a coachee first, and then I became a coach. And that's where I first started becoming fascinated with somatic language. And so how our body operates and how by simply changing something in your body, you can change the way that you come across or change your communication or, wiggle your toes and suddenly you're out of your head. And so from that perspective is where I started looking at how our body impacts the way that we communicate. And when people are in contradiction, when people are tight with their body. I would love to study it as much as you have, but I know for me as a tool when it comes to communication, it is wonderful, and I get excited. And when I tell people, squeeze your glutes for a second and just change your energy, and they're like, oh my God, that was crazy. Or even when I did it myself, right? I literally will change my body position when I'm stuck on something.
Right.
Okay,
That's
yeah.
great. I'm sorry, my
that's
mind just went squeeze your glutes. Oh yeah, now I gotta go to the bathroom.
That's right.
Okay.
Don't do Kegel.
That's a class
Squeeze your
act.
glutes.
Oh my gosh. So I think we need to go to some tips. What tips?
We absolutely need to go to tips.
Yeah.
So now we're going. Just did a big statistical run on podcasts, and the most popular podcast between 40 and 60 minutes.
And
so we're a little over. Part of it
we
was
also had to. Yeah.
we had to pan out. So
let's go to
actually, this is the point I wanted to get to. I'm loving this conversation. I could probably continue for 4 or 5 hours.
We may have to have you on again.
We're
Jess.
definitely going to have to have you on again. This
that.
is going to be a blast, and we'll have to get you live. I mean, Eagle Rock is
It's not that far.
Well, yeah, we're in Huntington Beach, so come down, enjoy the day.
I've got my passport, to
there
go.
You go. Yeah.
Area code. So.
Yeah, if it works out, we'll see you at WeHo. If you go.
Yeah,
so that'd be fun.
Okay, so let's go to tips.
Tips.
All right. Give us a tip, Jess. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So what would you tell someone who is thinking about their a new media career or who wants to be an influencer, what can they do to start to gain an audience or have a unique viewpoint, something like that?
So I think number one is define your brand.
Mhm.
So what is it that you stand for? What is it that you want to share with people? Because there needs to be two components. One is information and the other is connection. The information piece is the content. So what content are you sharing with people that's going to make their lives better, that might change the way that they think, or that gives them something practical in their lives? And the second part is, how are you connecting that to them? What are you sharing of yourself? What value proposition is in there? The second part of that is, you're not going to be everything to everyone. So immediately, if you define that audience that you have, forget the rest, because so many people dilute their message by trying to be everything to everyone. And so one of the great ways that I try to advocate that is that A factor that I talked about. Define your audience. And when you define your audience, in this instance, profiling is a good thing. What's their age? Does gender make a difference? What's their income? What might be their educational level? Where are they? Where do you find them? And what platforms are most important? And part of that is being visible to them and letting them identify themselves in you, and you also identify yourselves in them. Then your agenda. What are the points you want to make? What do you want to communicate to them? Not only in terms of tips, but about who you are. What do you want to share? And then your call to action. You want to get them to follow you. You want to get them to continue to come back to you because you got them in with your content. You got them in with your personality. If this is a following you want to build, then you have to get them to follow, and you have to provide that content consistently and regularly.
Good.
Excellent.
Nice.
Excellent.
What else? You want to ask him? Do you have a question?
Let's see. Entrepreneurs. No. Besides getting there. Oh yeah. Let's talk about print. How can you? I mean, there's so many. You were in Forbes, right? You've been quoted in
Yes.
Forbes and
Yes.
Inc. and those.
Yeah.
How do you get into the magazines like that?
Well, there are a couple ways. And this, and I do think this applies to executives as well, because we live in a world where people want transparency more than anything. And as I mentioned a moment ago, there's no way not to be on social media. And if you're not in charge of your message, somebody will be.
Right.
And so put yourself out there, be purposeful with it. It doesn't mean necessarily that you have to be inauthentic, but share something that people are going to relate to, that are going to like, even if it's aspirational. Regard getting onto something that is like an article or print or podcast, is to be visible. So that's where you're present in LinkedIn, in Instagram, in Facebook, although Facebook and Twitters are battle zones a lot for just, we've all been there, right? And we're all kind of tired of it. And also, believe it or not, TikTok, as much as it is a younger people platform, there's some great information on TikTok. I call her my Thea, and I forgot her name right now, but I follow her on TikTok, and I learned how to make tortillas and also salsa verde, because I asked my grandmother how to make tortillas, and it's like, oh, you need a handful of flour and then like a pinch of
Yeah,
this,
some and
and, a
lots,
little bit
right?
of
Some
salt.
of
I was
this,
like,
lots of that. Yeah.
okay, that doesn't mean anything to me because I just made pancakes. God bless your soul. Right? But there are these meetings out there where you have an opportunity to build your expertise. And if you have a following, sometimes the journalists follow you, or if you got an idea, pitch it. And there's a lot of free sources out there if you want to pitch things. Haro being one of them, which is help a
Yeah.
reporter.
I actually look through that every day.
Yeah.
When I get
And
them.
so they send out 3 emails a day. You look
Right.
through it. If there's something that you feel like you can contribute to, you submit an answer, and then they let you know whether or not you're doing. I like that because as a practice, it is just a really good practice for people to hone in on, how do I get something across in 300 words?
Yeah. I actually, a couple of months ago, Shonda Rhimes put out a call for stuff on, I think it was on either play or creativity, and I got quoted. So yeah,
Very good.
yeah.
I love that.
So yeah, so every so often I find something, because I am so niche, talking about play and creative and innovation. It's hard to find questions like that.
And I think it's brilliant that you're niche. And I think that's one thing that I would advocate for everybody is to, again, you can't be everything to everyone. And if there is something you are very passionate about, then you're probably really good at it. And if you cultivate that and you let people know that you do that and continue to dive into it, the people who need to find you will find you as
Yeah.
long as you're out there.
Right. And yeah, that's what we're trying to do.
So related to that, did you so you're in Forbes, you're in Inc. They know about you. They may not know about ABC, whoever it is, on something else. Should they put a media kit together and send it off blindly and say, hey, I'm available for this. Here's a couple of things. I mean, would you recommend something like that? Do you build that for people? Is that a service you provide?
So, yes, and a media reel can help you. And some marketing materials are always useful. It doesn't need to be elaborate. It doesn't need to be this big deck. It should actually be on one sheet because it's who you are, what is it that you have to say, and what are some story suggestions. In regards to a reel, you can do that right away. If you're doing some videos on TikTok, if you're doing videos on Instagram, wherever you happen to be doing your videos, put them together and make it short, make it like under 2 minutes so that people get a sampling of the things that you do. Those alone aren't going to get you noticed. Those are tools almost like books, like, because books, for most of us don't make a buttload of money,
Right.
but they're great calling cards that people say, oh, I can go and reference that. That's their expertise in there. So if you have these marketing materials, I think they're great. They're almost essential on some level, but you still got to get out there and you still got to market. You still got to network. You
Right.
still got to reach out to journalists. And the worst thing you can ask a journalist or producer is, oh, I'm this, do you have a segment on this? And if they want something, they go and they talk to publicists, they go out, they talk to the Ronas of the world. Hey, I need something on fitness in this. Great. She comes back in an hour and she's got it. The best way to pitch producers and journalists is with your idea. But watch the show, read the articles, and think of it as a magazine. There's got to be a magazine title and there's got to be 3 to 5 tips. Nobody wants to read 10 tips. 5 is actually almost too many.
Right.
Make them bite size and don't go on and on.
That's actually how I learned with when I was on View from the Bay. I had done my first segment, and I got a call from Jill Daniels. Do you remember
Yes.
her?
Yeah, I
So she's
remember.
actually not even in the industry anymore. And she says, I can make you a superstar. And we actually, I worked with her for a while. We actually did a trade on some things. And she was the one who taught me to, you want to be on again? You have to go back to them. This is what I want to do a segment on, have a title. These are 3 things. And that, because you only have 5-6 minutes.
Yeah.
And it obviously worked because I was on there quite a few times, once or twice a month for what, a year and a half.
Yeah. And that's the way to do it. You have to think of things in bite-sized pieces. And that still applies. That's still sort of a golden rule. It's almost like, give me the thesis and give me, 3 bullet points underneath.
Right.
And then give me a conclusion. I always say that, like, remember the 5-paragraph essay that we learned in like 4th grade? It is like a key to life on many levels.
Yeah.
Because give me your point, give me the things underneath it, and then conclude it. And if you can do that in less than 2 paragraphs, I will read it. If it's
You just
paid,
landed
I'm
on a
not going to read it.
you just
This is
landed
my
on a
issue.
running joke.
Because,
Thank you so much. Thank you. I get
Yeah.
to beat her over the head with it now. So
Yeah,
this
he
is
was,
great.
I come into things, a big part of play is improv, and Jeffrey is very much structure and form, and he keeps yelling at me. It's like 3
Yelling.
points. Well,
Really?
yelling, not yelling. And I'm also a little prone to exaggeration. So I know it's surprising, Jess.
But see, that's the perfect combination because
It
you can have improv and be extemporaneous within the context of a structure.
Which is exactly what we do, and that's a big lesson that he has taught me. And I'm still a work in progress, and that's okay.
As we
all are.
Because I
Jess,
can get away with it because I'm a little ditzy.
and Rona grabbed it. I mean, you gave us 3 tips. You just talked about 3 tips and sign off, and Rona goes on and on and on, which is great. We love her for it. Look, Jess, we got to have you back. We also thank you for the grace for being on here.
Yeah.
Because we have not been marketing it. Rona cringes every time I say it. We're still looking for our voice. This is different than what we've done before. We're off script and stuff. So this is good. We're going to have to come back to you and get your media knowledge and so that we rock. Because right now we are the greatest thing that nobody's ever heard of.
Just ask us. We'll tell you.
You know what? Keep telling people because they'll listen.
Yeah.
Just, put it out there and it's going to land with somebody. And, soon everyone will believe in you're the greatest thing they've ever
There you
heard.
go.
You've
Awesome,
been amazing.
Thank you so much.
This has been it's been a great pleasure, and you're so full of wealth. So how do people get hold of you?
So you can find me on Instagram, also on LinkedIn, and my website is jp3globalmedia.com. Again, that's jp3globalmedia.com. And if you Google me, remember to put the third. So it's Jess Ponce III, because I am not the female wrestler and I am not the makeup fashion influencer. So.
I just thought it was another facet of you.
You do so many things. You can get us on media and make us look great as well.
Only on Wednesdays.
That's right. That's right. All right. This has been Biz-Souls. I'm Rona Lewis.
I'm Jeffrey Hansler.
Thanks for playing with us. Thanks, Jess, for being here. And we'll see you guys later.
Fantastic. Jess, that was great.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely great.
Let me stop. You've been listening to the Biz-Souls podcast with your hosts, Rona Lewis and Jeffrey Hansler. Did you have fun? Subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. Talk to you next week.